Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Part 1. Mr. Utterson, a calm and eccentric man, lives a monotonous life that he does not like to change. He is a well-known lawyer, known for his strict discipline and his dislike of excitement or any disruption to his daily routine. He works with outcasts or those accused of breaking the law, but keeps his involvement strictly professional, never interfering in their personal issues. Utterson is a well-liked character, always valuing the advice of his friends and offering them support, but he does not make many new friends. He prefers to keep a close-knit circle of acquaintances and has a peculiar habit of going on a weekly walk with his cousin, Mr. Enfield. During one of their walks, the two men head down a quiet side street and notice a dilapidated house standing out among the otherwise elegant and well-kept buildings around it. The house appears to be in a state of disrepair and isolation. At this point, Mr. Enfield asks if Mr. Utterson has noticed the house before, and then proceeds to tell him a strange story connected to it, which piques the lawyer's curiosity. Mr. Enfield recounts a bizarre experience from one night when he was returning home late through a foggy, deserted street. He was feeling quite lonely when, suddenly, he encountered a strange man, short and deformed, walking rapidly as though on some urgent errand. As Enfield was walking in the same direction, a young girl, about 8 or 9 years old, collided with the man while running down the street. Without hesitation, the man knocked her to the ground, and instead of helping her or stopping to check on her, he continued walking over her leg, leaving her screaming in the street. Enfield was shocked by the man's cold demeanor, as he showed no remorse or hesitation. Enraged, Enfield yelled at him and tried to grab him, but when he succeeded, the man made no attempt to resist. He seemed unnervingly calm. Enfield had to call a doctor to attend to the girl, and when the doctor arrived, he reacted strangely, seeming very angry at the man. But when the doctor looked at the man, it was as though he recognized him, and there was a look of fear or disgust on his face. As the girl was taken to the doctor, Enfield told the strange man that he would reveal his appalling behavior to the whole city. The man responded in an eerily calm tone, saying, "If you're going to make a fuss, I'll have to pay compensation." Eventually, the man offered £100 to the girl as compensation. What astonished Enfield even more was that the man went to a nearby dilapidated house, the very house they were standing in front of now, where he disappeared for a short time, then returned carrying a check for £100. When Enfield examined the check, he was stunned to find that it was signed by a respectable and well-known person in the community, but the name on the check was forged. What puzzled Enfield further was that the strange man, whom he suspected of blackmailing someone respectable, did not seem to feel any guilt. In fact, the man had a sinister smile as he agreed to pay. When they went to cash the check, they discovered that it was legitimate. As Enfield thought more about the man's actions, he became more certain that he was dealing with an extremely peculiar and frightening person, someone with the ability to extort others. Over time, Enfield began referring to the house as the House of Extortion, believing that the strange man was blackmailing someone who lived in that dilapidated house and using it as a hideout for his evil deeds. But what was even more shocking was when Mr. Utterson, the family lawyer, was told that the strange man's name was Hyde, which was also connected to someone important in his life, Dr. Henry Jekyll, a friend for whom Utterson had been the lawyer. At that moment, Utterson felt a deep concern, but he did not speak of his worries about his friend. However, he began to feel that this mystery needed to be solved, and that there was a connection between Hyde and Jekyll, a connection that would require him to intervene in this increasingly puzzling story. On a Sunday evening, Mr. Utterson, the devoted lawyer of his old friend Dr. Henry Jekyll, sat in his office, preoccupied with many thoughts. But the thing that troubled him most was Jekyll's last will and testament. After reading it, he was shocked to discover that the will stated that in the event of Dr. Jekyll's death or disappearance for more than 3 months, all of his property would go to a mysterious person named Edward Hyde. Utterson did not know who this strange man was, but what concerned him even more was the condition about disappearance, as if Jekyll had been expecting this to happen someday. This raised many questions. Why would Jekyll leave everything to someone no one knew? Driven by his anxiety, Utterson decided to visit Dr. Lanyon, another of Jekyll's old friends. Utterson hoped that Lanyon might know something about Hyde, as he had been a long-time part of Jekyll's circle of friends. After a late dinner, Utterson went to Cavendish Square, where Lanyon lived. Upon arriving, Dr. Lanyon warmly welcomed his old friend, and soon their conversation turned to old times. But Utterson had another purpose for his visit. As soon as they sat down, he began to speak about Dr. Jekyll, and told Lanyon that he was concerned about Jekyll's last will. Utterson said, "I thought we were close friends, but what could possibly make Jekyll leave all his possessions to this strange man, Hyde?" Lanyon laughed and said, "You know Jekyll well, Utterson, but many years ago he became a strange man. He seemed very disturbed in his thoughts and started to pursue strange and unethical scientific experiments." Lanyon's words were shocking, and they raised more questions for Utterson about the relationship between Jekyll and Hyde. Then, hesitantly, Utterson asked, "Have you ever heard of a man named Hyde?" Lanyon answered, "Hyde? No, I've never heard of him." Utterson felt frustrated. He had hoped to get some insight from Lanyon about this person who was causing so much concern for his friend. It seemed to Utterson that Lanyon had clearly distanced himself from Jekyll over the years, perhaps because of the strange ideas Jekyll had begun to follow. Despite Utterson's attempts to understand what was happening between Jekyll and Hyde, Lanyon seemed unable to offer any clear answers. Utterson left Lanyon's house that night, and as he returned home, Lanyon's words haunted him. Jekyll has become a strange man. As Utterson tossed and turned in his bed throughout the night, his fears began to grow. Could Edward Hyde be someone who was blackmailing Jekyll? Were there dark secrets that Jekyll had been hiding from everyone? There were many questions that Utterson could not answer. Why was Jekyll leaving everything to this unknown man? Was there a connection between Jekyll's strange scientific experiments and the appearance of Hyde? As his anxiety deepened, Utterson resolved to confront Hyde directly. He felt it was time to uncover the truth about this mysterious man who had such a powerful influence over his old friend's life. After the mention of Mr. Hyde's name made Utterson even more worried about his connection with Dr. Jekyll, the lawyer decided to search for him himself. One night, Utterson went on a stakeout near the house that Enfield had talked about, standing in the quiet street waiting for Hyde's appearance. After some time, Hyde appeared, a small man in dark clothing. Utterson approached him and said, "I believe you're Mr. Hyde?" Hyde flinched for a moment, but then regained his composure and responded with a forced tone. Utterson, who felt a sense of disgust toward Hyde, asked to see his face directly. After a moment's hesitation, Hyde agreed. Then Hyde handed Utterson a card with his address in the shady Soho district, making Utterson wonder whether this address was connected to the strange will Jekyll had left for Hyde. Utterson asked Hyde how he knew him, and Hyde replied that he recognized him by description, mentioning Dr. Jekyll as a mutual friend. Hyde then burst into an ugly laugh before disappearing into the house at a startling speed. Utterson was left bewildered, growing more skeptical of the mysterious connection between Jekyll and Hyde, realizing that the mystery had grown even more complicated. One evening, Utterson arrived at Dr. Jekyll's house after witnessing the strange events involving Mr. Hyde. Before knocking on the door, Utterson was overwhelmed with confusion and anxiety, suspecting the mysterious relationship between Jekyll and Hyde. Despite the area around Jekyll's house changing, the house still bore the marks of wealth and care, standing out among the new, less elegant buildings that had since occupied the neighborhood. As Utterson entered the house, he was welcomed by the butler, Poole, and then waited in one of Jekyll's favorite rooms. The room was filled with fine art and a comforting, tranquil atmosphere. But at that moment, Utterson couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that something was terribly wrong. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell icon to receive all that is new. Thank you for watching. See you in the second part.